investigation. And so if you think of Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection or Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection, think of it as a detection of breach and post-breach analysis and remediation. So not only will we provide information that an analyst in the SOC would need or a responder would need to determine the state of compromise, we also provide automation and capabilities to actually go ahead and remediate that endpoint to allow that user to get back to work and to contain the scope and depth of breach. Microsoft Defender ATP can cover Windows 7 clients. You have to install an agent on that. It can cover Windows 10. That component is built into Windows 10, and so you actually enable that. And because it's built into Windows 10, it is always up to date with Windows. The advantage of a cloud-hosted service like this is when we added capability, for example, the advanced threat and vulnerability management, I'll show you in a few minutes, we were able to enable that capability, and customers using the service had to do nothing to their on-premises resources. We just made the capability available in the cloud, and magically customers could take advantage of it. So you have a really interesting opportunity here, sort of an evergreen security solution, because as we make advancements to the solution, those will become available to you via the cloud without having to do work on the client. And then if we make advances in Windows 10 or in Server 2016 or 2019, as you deploy those later builds, those later versions, you'll gain those capabilities auto-magically also. So I've logged in here the default. So for the folks that are on the phone, can you give me an idea sort of what the spread is? Do I have security? Do I have analysts from the SOC? Do I have hunters? Do I have operations folks? That'll help me kind of figure out where I might want to start so I don't bore too many people. I shouldn't say lose people. I won't lose you all, but I don't want to bore too many people. And a failure to respond on the phone means John just dictates where he starts to go play. So
we might have across the board. I'm on the policy side. I think there's some other guys from the ops side as well.
Okay. Well, I got some stuff to make the policy side happy. So, well, let's start. Yes, sir.
So I'm looking at command and control and policy.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll start with the boring stuff, I guess, just to make life easy. So I'll start here, what you would be dealing with if you were administratively setting this project up. So data storage, because this instance I'm using is hosted in our Azure public cloud, I have options for data storage. The version of this that the DoD would be using in production will actually be in our government cloud, and so those radio buttons wouldn't be available. We also allow you to specify a data preference, so a data retention timeline. And again, because I'm not admin to this whole environment, because it's a shared demo environment, I can't change that. We can modify and set custom alerts. So if there's a particular custom rule or custom alert you want to specify, we can configure those and set alerts. We can do all sorts of really cool dashboarding using Power BI, so I can have a view of the data and the state of the environment or the enclave that I'm monitoring and remediating that I use for operational purposes, and then I can create a dashboard for compliance or a dashboard for leadership that sort of shows the state. So I have the ability to build all of these things. Have any of you seen Secure Score within Office 365? Okay. Some of the operations folks might want to get access to that. So we have this component called Secure Score. We have two of them, one for Office 365 and one for Windows. And what the Secure Score does is it basically takes a look at the state of your environment, so the services you have turned on in Office 365, for example, or here, these particular settings, and in the case of Windows Defender or Windows Defender ATP, for every endpoint that's reporting back, whether it's a client machine or a server machine, we're going to measure against these particular controls and then give you a score based on that. So if you've got 8 of 10 things turned on, you get an 8 out of 10. We'll also make recommendations on how to improve the score. We do the exact same thing in Office 365. So think of it like a compliance risk snapshot. This allows you to go in and look at the current state of the environment, see some recommendations you may choose to take that would improve your posture or change your risk profile, and then you can use that to measure over time. We keep 30 days of data available in the system, but you can export this for other uses. We have a full RBAC model. And so we can do this via rollback access control, and we can actually tag machine groups. There's a blog post on an example architecture we built for a use within a healthcare vertical where they actually had 2 SOCs, and within the SOCs they had multiple teams. And so they had a team just dealing with the executive machines, and they had teams dealing with machines geographically distributed. And so using the tagging capability in the RBAC model, you can do very, very flexible choice about who can see what and who can make impact or change to what. So it allows you to be very flexible in your operational implementation of the tool. Okay. We have a series of threat intelligence APIs. One of them is what's called the Intelligent Security Graph, which is plumbing built into our cloud services that you can leverage and allows you to do some really interesting things. We have a series of what are called security providers that snap into that, and those security providers, for example, are not just Microsoft capabilities, but we have a host of third parties writing to this, so Cisco, F5, things like that. So if you're running an F5 firewall in Azure, that actually snaps into this whole infrastructure, and you can do push-pull kind of interesting things with it. We do integration with SIEMs. We integrate really well with Azure Sentinel, but we also integrate and allow you to extract the data and alerts out of this tooling into your existing SIEM so it can be integrated into your operational flow. We allow you to find custom detections. So if there's a particular IOC or IOA that you're seeing that you want to use to trigger on, you can come in here and define those, and then those would run across your data once a day. If you wanted to run them at any particular time, you can also. We also have a full hunting capability, and I'll go into that a little later, where you can do custom hunting across the endpoints. And the amount of data you're hunting across, again, is a function of the number of endpoints reporting in, and when you tagged it, when you set the system up, how much data you're actually archiving. We can, of course, suppress alerts. So, for example, if we have a set of machines that we know our security researchers are using, and we want to set that those machines, if certain malware, like Mimikatz or other tooling is installed, we don't want to get an alert on that because they are sanctioned to do that because they are actually researchers in that place. We can come in and define that so that we don't get false positives into the environment. We can define indicators. Again, we can use these indicators to look for behavior, look for good or bad behavior, and then choose to take action. And we can do that on file hashes, IP addresses, URLs, and domains. We can generate automatic allow and block lists. So we can say these things, think of whitelisting, blacklisting, and this can complement things that we're already doing if you're using App Locker built into Windows 10. All right, we can do automatic folder exclusions again. This is useful again for those machines that security researchers might be using where we know they may need to install certain tools that by default for everybody else's machine would be considered evil and a security violation. Onboarding and offboarding. So to actually turn what's called the Sense agent on, again, that's built into Windows 10, we would come in here and then pick at the devices or machines we're looking to target. So you notice here's my Windows 7 and 8 machines, 10 servers, my Mac Linux. So I say we pick Windows 10. I then can choose my deployment method. So I can create a local script that I could then run on those machines. So let's say they're not highly connected to the network. Maybe they're out on the flight line or something, and I want to enroll those. I can use group policy, so I can actually do a phased deployment. So if I want to bring on, say, group one OU at a time, I can use group policy to do that deployment. And then I can use System Center, I can use Mobile Device Manager, and I have a VDI onboarding script that I can use for non-persistent desktops that I still want to monitor, but they obviously operate a little differently. So this gives me flexibility. I would do the reverse of this if I'm actually looking to take a machine that I was monitoring and remove it from monitoring. So you onboard, offboard via this approach. What the script generates is some information for the machine. It tells it the endpoint that it's going to be communicating with. It generates the appropriate keys that are necessary to be able to establish that connection, that TLS connection to the service, and then encrypt the content so that as it transits over the wire, it's in a protected state. So far, so good on the management side?
Hey, John, good here. One thing I wanted to mention real quick, just for those on the call, make sure they're aware, we do have an ongoing pilot within the Air Force currently, and all of the onboarding methods that John just mentioned, we have tested within the AFNet, and they have worked successfully. So Just worth noting there.
Sure, and thanks. And speaking of that, so just for some context, because the term internally at Microsoft is eating our own dog food. I've did a rotation. So I don't know if you're all familiar. We have something called the Cyber Defense Operations Center. Sort of like a SOC, but it's a little different. It is where we've got about 3,500 folks chartered with defending Microsoft and the services we offer to our customers operate. There's multiple teams in there, and each team is responsible for defending a certain piece of real estate. So there's a team in there that defends the fabric of Office 365. There's a team in there that defends the fabric of Azure. There's a team in there that defends Windows Source, Windows Update, Xbox. There's a team in there that defends Windows endpoints that us as employees use. And they're different teams because the area of responsibility they have and the type of systems they're defending are very different. And so it allows us to have very deep knowledge in that area, but they can swivel the chair and do a data fusion and threat sharing across the environment because they're all sitting near each other. I've done a rotation out there, so I've been a tier 2 analyst in the CDOC using this tooling. We have this tool enabled on our corporate network, and we're monitoring nearing 700,000 endpoints with it. And we're leveraging it quite effectively as a defense in-depth mechanism and a live tool that's used in the CDOC to defend and respond to attacks against Microsoft machines. So as a security operations individual, so if I was sitting in the CDOC, as I have, and I'm sitting there, walk onto my shift, one of the places I would come in here is to take a look at what is going on. So I can look at the active alerts. So what is currently going on in the environment, the state of those, then determine and triage where I'm going to start to invest the next couple hours of my morning as I start to hunt around and look at what's going on. So I can see information about the identities that are at risk here. So these identities have something based on actions being taken on the endpoint that they've been using that could cause me challenges within the enterprise. And so I can track and look at that. I can leverage that. I can look at specific machines. I can drill into the machines at risk. I can look at the alerts. I can look at information and exposure. I can start to track what is going on about this machine and drill into that. So I can say, okay, a known vulnerable driver is loaded, possible process execution. Not easy for me to say today. I can then drill and I can manage this alert. So I can say the status is new. I can select the classification. I can see the incident is a weaponized document with elevation of privilege and lateral movement. So I know it's going to be a bad day for me for a little while as I work through and I basically go to resolve this particular attack against the environment and this compromise. I can see the machine. Again, the information about the machine, I can go to the machine timeline. I'll jump there in a second. I can see details of the machine, threats and active alerts. I can see the IP addresses it's been communicating with, so I could pass that on to networking and ask a request to block. I can see comments and history based on this event and alert. So this gives me a lot of information as the actual analyst. That's because I'm drilling into an older one. I can put a time range in. I can load events. I'm moving backwards in time on that one. So I can see recommendations based on this. So I can see the fact that I've got an older version of zip running on, and I've got some other things on this machine that are probably bad. I can see here that there's a known public exploit for this particular player that's out there in the wild. And so again, probably not a good thing there. I probably need to patch and bring this up. I can look at the software inventory of this endpoint. I can look at discovered vulnerabilities of this endpoint, so I can see all the CVEs that I'm currently missing on this machine. So this guy's, I might just have to nuke and pave this one. It doesn't look like it's in a pretty good state. So as I troll through here, I've got access to these. More importantly, for the case of a machine that triggers, so we looked at that one before, right? We saw the remote WI execution. In this case, that triggered an automatic investigation for this machine. So the tool itself, when it noticed this particular state of conditions, then went out and did research on the endpoint, just as the analyst would, and pulled this information back and used machine learning and other things across it. And so I can see that we see the WMI trigger this. We saw the alert there. We saw a correlated alert to this. We see that 2 machines were involved in this investigation. We see all of the information that was analyzed. We see these processes. So it looks like 2 bad processes were started. We see 3 files. So I know 3 files were compromised or levers within this attack. I can see that we were communicating with 1 malicious IP address. I can see that the system itself waited 45 seconds for the machine. So it took about 45 seconds for it to conduct this analysis. And then we waited 43 minutes for the analyst to come in and go remediate. We could have automated this whole thing and actually had it take these actions without the individual, the analyst, being involved. Most people don't jump right into auto remediation. They tend to look at the playbooks, define the playbooks, refine the playbooks, get very comfortable with them, and then start to actually let some of these things happen within the system so that they're not, again, physically having to touch every machine to make these remediations. So the idea here is it allows us to reduce the fatigue on some of those tier 1 analysts, to reduce the amount of time from a particular incident occurring to be able to close that incident out and remediate that particular endpoint so the users can get back to work. So again, we can track across this and see the specific alerts. We can see the machines involved. We can see the key findings that were brought out, what was remediated. We can see quarantining of the files. We can see pending actions and history, again, how long it took us to do these actions. So basically it provides me a nice view, and the system collected all this. I, as the analyst, didn't have to. It was able to provide this information for me. Just so the compliance folks that were on the phone a few minutes ago, I know 2 of them expressed that they're sort of compliance. This is a brand new capability that we enabled about a month and a half ago within the service, and this is called the Threat and Vulnerability Dashboard. And so what this allows me to do is it's taking that telemetry from those endpoints that are configured, again, whether those are clients or servers, whether those are Windows or Mac or Linux machines, and draw them into a single console where I can look at the risk exposure of the organization as a whole. I can see what my ranking is. I can see my top vulnerable software that I may need to remediate. And I can see my distribution of exposure. I can see the top machines that I need to remediate. I can actually start tracking these. I see security recommendations that are available for the enterprise so that the agency or the enterprise can now make these changes. So if you know the whole work that's going on in the government about constant monitoring and reporting, here you're seeing a implementation of that, but not just monitoring, the ability to take action and do remediation within a single environment without having to jump between 35 different things. So as you click through this, we can see information on the machines. We can see it's a high-risk asset. So we can see details about this asset. We can move over to the alerts queue if we want. Again, we could pump all of these or a subset of these alerts into the SIEM if the SIEM is the work queue. And so for example, when I was doing some of my work in the CDOC, the SIEM would pop the item to the top of the list. That would be the item in the work queue that I would then go off. I would take that information and I would come into Defender ATP and I would start my analysis of the endpoint and the identities involved. If necessary, I would pivot into Office 365 to take a look, because let's say the attachment came in via email. I could see if anyone else received it. I could pivot into Azure ATP, see if this identity from this machine had been harvested and used to touch other machines it doesn't normally touch. I would look at MCAS and start to see, was data exfilled? What information were their files pushed off onto wide open shares? And so basically it allows me to get my eyes around the scope of what is happening within this incident and then start to figure out how I'm going to tactically and surgically deal with my remediation versus just kind of whacking the machine and moving on from there. So I already brought you into the automated investigation, so you saw that. Saw the incidents, and again, just to look at the incident page. We can filter all of this. We can assign these to users as a work queue. We can clear the filters. Right, as we click on these, again, we're drilling into it. We can bring details up, take a look at that particular context. Again, we can see comments and information. This allows us a lot of information. Here's the secure score I talked about. So this is the Windows version. This is an example. There's Office. We show them side by side if the 2 tools are integrated. We can see top recommendations. We can see the improvement to our score if we take these actions, right? We can take a look at trends and scores below. We can see the machines involved, the number of machines. And so again, we're trying to give you a pretty clear sort of compliance look in the world that is going and a trend that we're having over time, so we can see that trend as we move across the time value. Right, we can see our threat analytics, so we can see the information and statistic around the organization, what we've been seeing and what disclosures, things are happening within the environment or coming after us or have come after us historically. Let's see. Yeah, let's go over to hunting. So before I go into hunting, any questions so far? Bueller?
Hi, this is Jeff from the 83rd.
Hi, Jeff.
You mentioned that you guys have about 700,000 systems being monitored with this tool. Comparing that environment to this demo that you're showing us, how responsive is it?
Great question.
As far as drilling down on stuff.
I have actually had better performance on the production environment than I sometimes hit in this demo environment. Where the underlying data repository is a data lake, so we're not storing this in a single SQL database server somewhere. It's actually, think of it like a Hadoop cluster, if you're familiar with Hadoop clusters. So underlying this is an entire data lake, which is where this hunting this data is stored. The language we're going to use here for this hunting is called Cousteau. If you're old like I am, you'll remember the old Jacques Cousteau TV shows, and obviously if it's a data lake, you can see the bad pun that the developers worked with. That same language, Cousteau, is used within our Azure Security Center product, our Azure Sentinel product, our Log Analytics product. So once you learn Cousteau, which is sort of a hybrid of PowerShell and SQL, you can actually leverage that language across multiple products, security products within Microsoft. There's an entire GitHub repository where individuals and organizations are posting hunting queries that you can borrow from. You can load your own in here. You can share these queries within your own analyst team, or you can keep them for yourself. So let's see. Here I'm going to do a hunt for M10 in command line arguments. So here's the actual query. I'm going to modify it on the fly. Let's start with the last 20 days. So I'm going to run this query against 20 days of data. I get no results. All right, good. This would be an example of where I'm hunting backwards in time. I'm now going to hunt across 120 days. Okay. Let me see here. What about 320 days? Do I get any hits there? Oh, magic. So I can see some image load events. I can see the process command lines. I can actually now further modify this query right here. I could remove these machines and rerun the query. I could remove these initiating command lines and run this query. I can search on file hashes. I can come in here and start typing. If I were to start typing, you'll notice IntelliSense begins to appear, and it actually starts to provide me the parameters. And then in the parameters, the actual other conditions that I'm applying. So if you've ever used Visual Studio or PowerShell, it's a very similar model to the IDE. Let's see, let's look for hidden. So I'm going to search 7 days. No hits. Let's go 70 days. This is a live demo, so I don't even know if I'll get a hit in 70 days. What's nice about this, though, is, again, if you find a new indicator of compromise or indicator that you're interested in, you can search backwards across all of the endpoints reporting for that entire period of time that you're storing information. You can create your own queries. You can create your own custom detections. If you define a custom detection or a custom rule in here, we'll run that rule once a day. We will slide the exact time. We don't run it every day at the exact same time because we're trying not to degrade the performance. But you can, of course, at any time hit the button to execute the command, and that would then run that query for you, right? So in this case, we're looking for communication to a known bad ID or a bad IP address or a particular URL. And again, I can see communication information around that. The schema is defined up here. And so if you're looking to understand the columns and IDs, think of it as a table structure, but it's not really a table in the database. But these are the columns and information we define. And again, we have shared queries, so I can go and define queries so my team or my group of analysts could leverage those queries, or Air Force as a whole could leverage those queries. But I could also have sub-queries that are just for my Tier 2 or Tier 3 hunters who are actually looking around in the information and doing this. Questions on hunting? if I understand correctly, next week when they come out, they're going to bring a top-tier hunter with you. And so she will be able to do some really cool stuff that I can only dream about. So please take advantage of her while she's there. Advanced hunters are a rare breed, as you guys all probably know. Guys, you're making this too easy because you're not asking me any questions. So just because I said Macs are available, and not everybody believes me until I show them. Come on now. The only problem with this is trying to navigate without the browser window. If I come down here and scroll, if you take a look at the operating system shown, there you'll see some Macs reporting in. As the first part of this capability comes online, and again, Windows 7, Windows 10, Server 16, Server 12 R2. We cover a broad amount of the environment, and again, even right now with third parties, that allows us to cover Mac and Linux, and then again, those are going to become first party, so we like to say capabilities of the platform itself.
Hey, John, this is Elgin.
Hello, Elgin.
Hello. Do you see any issues? We have a lot of VDI environments within the Air Force. Do you see any issues at all? I know this is probably a big concern for us because we use VDI. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So again, we have the ability to onboard VDI. Where did that go? Oh, Windows 10. And then here I can specify a onboarding script for VDI devices. So we recognize that you have within the enclave these assets which are going to be in a sense semi-ephemeral, right? They're going to come up, they're going to be used, and they're going to go away. They may not always get the same IP address, just like a machine moving through Wi-Fi access points, right? That can keep getting different IPs, and that can throw things off. So we've built a product understanding that operational concern and that operational need. The team that builds this product spends time every couple months in our Cyber Defense Operations Center sitting with the analysts to gain understanding of how they're using the tool so they can go back and make changes to make it better for them. They also participate. We have an event called One Hunt, which is our large-scale red versus blue exercise that Microsoft conducts against itself. We actually now have folks from the product teams that rotate in and spend time on the red side and on the blue side so they can gain a better understanding of attacker techniques and defender techniques so that when they go and make changes to the product, they can make the product better at catching the reds and make it easier for the blues. Did that help at all?
Awesome. Thanks.
Sure.
Hey, John, I think it's this is Kevin. I just thought it was also worth noting that so in the Air Force pilot tenant, we got a handful of folks with access there. I've been playing around in there for the past 4 or 5 months since it's been live, and even over that time, the entire threat and vulnerability management node, that's all new. Yep. There's been tons of additional integration and features that have been lit up just over the 4 or 5 months, and it's pretty amazing because there's absolutely nothing that needs to be done by the operational folks to actually light those up or turn any of those on, and there's zero on-prem footprint. So yeah, you just get it. One other thing with the threat analytics, since we're on that page, that wormable RCE vulnerability in RDP, that was made available the day that we announced it. I logged in and it was already there. So pretty amazing. I mean, we do so much of the work on our end. It's pretty incredible.
Yes, if we take a look at some of these, let's see here. So this information, are any of the folks on the call familiar with our team called Mystic, our Microsoft Threat Intelligence team? So we have a team in Microsoft. They actually operate out of our Reston, Virginia office, our Redmond office, and they operate over in the UK. They're chartered specifically with tracking nation-state actors. They track 80 to 100 actor groups. They build operational dossiers, TTPs, and all of that deep understanding of the adversary Because if you think back to Sun Tzu, right? If you don't know your network, if you don't know your enemy, you don't know yourself, you don't know the ground, you're never going to win many battles. So Mystic is there to help us understand the enemy. And so some of the threat intelligence information and content that they produce surfaces now in this console under threats. We are not doing attribution. Say that again. We are not doing attribution. What we're trying to do, though, is provide the responder, the analyst, context. If we're seeing a particular set of TTPs that look like they map to a particular actor group, we're going to surface that information so you have an idea of who's coming after you, how they operate, and what you need to look for in that sense. So we're trying to provide an aid to the analyst and responders, but we, again, are not doing what? We are not doing attribution. Because attribution is really,
hey,
really
Jay.
hard.
Hey, Jay, this is Jay. What you just said about Sun Tzu folds in perfectly with the decision cycle developed by a Colonel Boyd back in the 70s. It's called the OODA loop.
Yes,
Observe,
sir.
orient, decide, act. In the observe category, and that Sun Tzu also talked about, if you cannot observe, then you can't orient or prioritize. And so the problem on the AFNet is 218 cyber tools trying to observe, most of them in stovepipes, very few of them sharing data. And that's why we've really talked hard about ATP, because we use artificial intelligence and machine learning in the observe area. What that in turn gives us is an ability to wicker down 1 trillion cyber signals down to the ones that we have to orient on so we can prioritize, then decide and act. But observe is one of the most critical, and Sun Tzu backed that up too.
Oh, yes, and that's part of the flexibility, the advantage you gain by leveraging this. Instead of bolting on 6 other agents, this agent is built in. So you're never going to have a delay waiting for a third-party component to keep up with Windows. So if you want to deploy 1803 or 1906, you can deploy it and you're going to gain capability because of what we've added to the platform. And so the time, the flash to bang is much shorter here. And this tool shares threat intelligence and information with Office 365, for example, ATP. So let's say an email attachment came in, very crafted payload, no way that it was brand new, no one ever seen it before. The guy was really good at coding it up. It didn't trigger some of the normal block on first sight behaviors that Windows antivirus could use. Hit the disk or hit the machine, did something strange. Once Defender ATP determines that it's actually acting evil because we have the hash of the file, it will send that signal, if you choose, back to Office 365 ATP, and Office 365 ATP would then zap that file from everybody else who got it as an email attachment to help mitigate the spread of that particular payload and that particular attack. And again, just as you said, orient, right? So if I know that this identity has been compromised, so let's go back to, we go to the machine list. Actually, we'll go back up here. We'll go to operations. We'll go to Jonathan's machine, right? If I know Jonathan's identity has been compromised, right? If I know logged on users, this piece right here isn't turned on in this demo right now. But if I know the logged on users, I also know all the other identities on that asset. So now if I know John's identity or my identity has been compromised, I can pivot into Azure ATP and I can see whether or not somebody's trying to do pass the hash with that identity across the network. Or if they have, I can see which machines they hit. So again, I can build around this particular problem a visual, a clarity of it. I won't say a blast chamber because depending on how fast I'm acting, I might or might not be stopping it. But I'm starting to see exactly what's going on. And instead of following a list, I'm moving and thinking more as the attacker does, which is in a graph, right? And I'm pivoting around as I'm making these moves. And again, I can pivot across these within these consoles. They just become other tabs if you choose to enable that, right? Some of this isn't turned on by default because that would mean you trust us a whole lot. So it's a chance for you to make those determinations and operate with these things. I can drive around in here for another, I forget what time we have a hard stop. I can spend some more time in here. I can answer some questions. I really want to understand what it is. We want to make sure we cover very well in even deeper detail next week when the folks show up. I apologize I can't be there next week. I had a commitment already on the books that I couldn't get out of. And I want to make sure I've given you at least enough of a feeling and some understanding of this that if you go to the meeting next week, you'll be able to get a lot of value out of it.
And
Hey, John.
just to be clear, I just want to make sure for those on the call that may for some reason not be aware, there's June 20th next week in San Antonio. There's going to be a full day workshop where there'll be some additional presentations from the product group, from some advanced threat researchers and advanced hunters, really some heavy hitters from Microsoft coming in. That's going to be down in San Antonio. I know a large complement of the Air Force cyber folks are out that way. So yeah, that's really just wanted to make sure everyone was clear on that.
Was there a question?
Oh, that was me, John. Zvi.
Oh,
How you doing?
hey Zvi, how you doing?
Very good. So just for the people on the call, it's mainly my team and peers that are coming down there to meet you. So the more information you can pass Kevin up front about areas you want to deep dive or questions you may, how do I complete this scenario with this product? How would I go by? And we can actually go and deep dive into that. We can probably improvise as we're there, but if you have ideas of scenarios that are important for you to complete in the day-by-day work that you do today, or that you cannot complete today, but you're dreaming to complete, then that's something that we will be happy to go into.
So just for some reference, as we deployed this internally in the Cyber Defense Operations Center, we started with about 40,000 machines. They jumped to 100,000 machines. He jumped to 250, then to 300,000, 450,000, 600,000, and is well beyond that now. Because again, it doesn't require any infrastructure on premises. It's basically building that package. And let's say you want to target via GPO, targeting via GPO, pushing that out to the machine, and then the machine starts reporting telemetry. Because again, you're turning a capability that's nascent in the platform on, in the case of Windows 10. Now, if you're dealing with the Windows 7 and 8 machines, you do have to install an agent. So that deployment is a slight bit different. But again, we're enabling capability that is built into the platform. If you've got any forensics folks on the call, you'll probably notice that this is pretty much all of the high order cone that you would normally be pulling. This is not an end case image of the disk, but it is the high order information I need to conduct a normal investigation. Again, I can take a look that I've pulled all the services drivers. I can see the communication information. I can see which files are remediated. I see the alerts that are tied to this again. So back to that visibility and OODA loop discussion, this is giving me again that ability to orient and act.
This is Kevin. I'm curious if we have any of the, I know I've been fielding a lot of questions from the HBSS teams, and they've been curious on the comparisons between products. I know there were several folks from 561st who reached out to me, as well as others. Do we have any of the HBSS folks on the line that had any questions around this tool and some of the features that may overlap between how they use McAfee today?
This is Tom Dean at 624. I think one thing we need to do is get quite a few of our really smart folks from the 33rd there at this seminar, because they will probably have some good questions. I've got a couple of observations. One, things I think we'd like to see would be the ability to go in and write more and more custom scripts for custom hunting on the Afton. And then the second one would be integration of other tools that we use, such as ARAD or anything else that we're going to use in the future that we could use, so that an analyst only has one or two screens that they have to go to, and so to cut their time switching between screens and having to do wetware analysis.
Okay. So again, this is where hunting is conducted. You can put any of your own custom scripts in or custom queries in. There's a set of queries here. There's an entire GitHub community that actually has queries that are posted out there that you can, if you choose to contribute to or borrow from. So we tried to, in a sense, open source the hunting capabilities to allow everybody to come up with really interesting things and the community to gain from that. There's nothing that says you couldn't do something similar but private within DoD.
Okay, and the other thing would be, could you also show us how to integrate other tools such as ARAD or any other third-party tools that are out there? Because I know you mentioned that at one time, but I'd like to see a little bit more on that.
Sure. So I apologize. I don't know what ARAD is, so I'm not sure how it.
It's titanium.
I see ArcSight and I see,
So this is how I would configure this to send alerts out of Windows Defender or Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection to these particular seams. I can also send it out through a generic API. So if the other tool has an API, we could write some glue code to stitch those together and then be able to pass information back and forth.
So in general, yeah, we can dedicate some time next week for looking at specific tools that you have and how you connect. But there is multiple ways to do that. You can, as John just said, pull alerts from the SIM API, which is already pre-tested. If you want, it will support ArcSight. We use that in Microsoft. So you can use that. You can use a rich set of APIs that the platform allows to actually command it and integrate with it. So theoretically, you can even have an external tool write the queries for you, perform them, and then download the data set somewhere else. There's a lot of tooling you can do on top of that. But we can, I'd love to see the specific, scenarios that you want to try complete, and then we'll come back with a reference architect for completing each one of them.
Right.
Because there's probably multiple ways of accomplishing each one of the scenarios you want. But almost, I would say, maybe running a little bit, maybe one release late, our API will allow you to access almost any functionality of the platform, including accessing the raw data itself.
Trying to think what else I didn't show, Zvi. The other thing is, are you guys investigating Jupyter Network?
John, do you have on that view, did you have live response?
Yeah, I was looking for that, and I don't think it's turned on.
No, I don't think it's turned on here. Okay, so one thing we can show you next week, it's something, it's still private preview. One of the requests of the more advanced teams that we've been working with in the last year was that how do I actually connect to the endpoint in real time and run my own scripts or run my own tools or against that? So we actually allow now the command control, if you want, channel between the portal and the endpoint, allow you to run any tool. We'll actually open a shell, a command into the machine, but it will log everything. It's secure, so it's much more than just connecting remotely to the machine, which will allow you now to connect with all your tools. So if you connect that with an API with your tools, you can almost completely automate a connection to the machine, run on it whatever you need, and pull that data set back to or run any command. So we understood that some of the advanced teams have their own tools and own scripts that they want to run on an endpoint when they're doing IR. So now we open that capability versus you needing to reach out to the person that's running the endpoint, ask him to run a script for you or something like that. You can just connect to it remotely.
Right. And you'll notice in the top of this window, you see something called the Collect Investigative Package, Run AV Scan, Restrict App Execution, Isolate Machine. So these are grayed out because I'm not sitting on an older version of Windows 10. So if I'm actually have a mixed environment where not all my Windows 10 boxes are running the most current version of Windows, it doesn't mean you can't do things and gain visibility. You'll still have insights and everything else. So in this case, if it was a very old version of Windows 10 where I can't do the automated investigation because the Sense agent doesn't have that capability, I could still actually manually collect an investigation package from that machine that I could analyze offline, that I can pull down. I can also do things like isolate the machine. So I could send a command to it where it changes the firewall on the machine, the firewall settings, Windows Firewall kicks in, and that machine then can only communicate back with the console so that I can try and remediate that asset and work with the owner of that machine as we're taking action. So this doesn't require you to be running the most current version of Windows 10. But as you evolve your versions of Windows 10, you will gain capability without having to redeploy this tooling because it's, again, a cloud service. And as Zvi is talking about, as we add things like live response, They will become available to you in your enclave or in your subscription or environment without you having to touch all the boxes. And so for the folks that are managing and the care and feeding of the HBSS resources, you can take some of those assets and those individuals and put them into higher value work. So they're not necessarily doing the care and feeding of some blinky lights on a server. They can actually go do more important work in the network and help the organization as a whole. And then you'll repurpose some of them to actually manage some of this. So again, it doesn't mean that all those people's jobs go away. You can just actually give them better things to go do than look at blinky lights. We did some testing for a government agency. I'm not allowed to say which one. They took a bunch of their third-party sensing tools off. They turned on capabilities that are built into Windows 10, and they reduced the boot time by 6 minutes. So there is some advantage to leveraging something that is built into the platform. This doesn't mean you can't have other tools like Tanium and things on the machine. It's just obviously the more that you're leveraging built-in capability and capacity, the less performance hits you're going to see on the endpoint. Z, anything I forgot to cover besides the live response that you hit on? I will click wherever you want me to click.
No, I think we're good. I want to make sure that all the latest. So when we're down there, we can probably connect to just everybody on the call understand the Ring 0 for us, where we really experiment everything. I can share that. I cannot share that over the screen because it's looking at Microsoft data, but we can share that when we're down there and show you how this actually runs on our tenant. And there will be some advanced capabilities that are not released yet into what you're looking at. Right. We can do that in the workshop.
So here I just went into the software inventory. So it says within the enclave, so within all of the endpoints, clients and servers are reporting, there's 231 unique applications being used within the environment. And again, I can start to look at this and see what this does to my overall security posture. I can see, again, what's going on, remediation actions, which have completed. So of the 27 machines that had the older version, I now see that we've caught up and that the fact that these, again, have been taken care of. So I can track progress on this as I'm moving forward to adjust and manage this risk. Again, we'll see a series of recommendations provided to me based on the telemetry reported back from all of the endpoints, again, clients and servers. And so I can take a look at that and I can see the impact this would have to my overall position. I can see the number of machines that are exposed to this. Again, I can see information on the details. I can see whether or not there's an exploit actively available for this. So I know that this is information, again, context back to that OODA loop. I can orient and decide here. I'm given information, again, as an analyst and a responder to go take action. This is what I find is very, very powerful about this tooling is it's not a report that I'm then going to go sit on for a week. This allows me within the consoles to actually fight the fight and make the network a safer place to operate on. I get excited about this though, so I apologize.
Hey, John, this is Kevin. No, it's great. It's a great point that you bring up, and just to kind of pile on a bit, I work with the NOS and the Cyber Ops Squadron. I sit with 690th Cause, and I know that we rely heavily on ACAS for our scanning and reporting. And really, what the benefit here is that with ACAS we run a scan of everything. We get a list of all these things that we need to remediate, but we don't have this level of prioritization within the tool to where, hey, can I look and see, where am I going to get the best bang for my buck, and really think in terms of cyber defense and security capabilities instead of just, hey, I'm trying to hit my compliance numbers and make sure I'm going to do well in the next CCRI. Right. It brings another level to it.
No pending actions found. That's good. So this here is, again, if I had a action pending, so the system had done analysis and I'm waiting, and I've got a playbook that I'm ready to run, but I'm waiting for the analyst to look at this and hit the button go, this is where it would be sitting. But again, we have nothing holding here. And again, filters, you've noticed I can do filtering on all this, so I can modify my view, Again, I can zoom in and scope so I can see different things. So again, this information can be exported. That the whole Power BI can be used to create custom dashboards. So I can provide a leadership view and an operations view of all of this information. How else can I help, gentlemen and ladies?
Hey, John, this is Elgin again. Are you able to show how Office ATP, if you receive a malicious attachment through Office 365, can you do the correlation within MD ATP to Office ATP?
Yeah, you have to give me a minute because I've got to go get into Jonathan's machine and I've got to move backwards in time a ways. What will happen is, so let's see here, non-normal driver. There we go. Let's take a look at this guy, process injected. I'm glad you asked that question because I forgot to show all this really cool stuff. So here we see a process injected with potentially malicious code. This is alert as part of this particular incident. Again, here's my actions. This is an actions pane relative to this incident. I can see the context, the machine, and the identity that are involved in this. I can see information about what we're showing. I can show more of this or less, right? So some steps that the analyst can take. I can see the full process tree. I can now see detailed information. I can look at the incident graph. So we produce a graph. We produce a graph. Come on. Well, we'll scroll down and come back to the graph. We can see artifact timeline. I can see the hash of this file. I can see where it's executed. So in this case, right, we're getting flagged because WinWord.exe went from running as user mode to an elevated mode. I can open this in a new tab. So if I want to go over here, I can see information about this particular. See, it's a live demo. This particular file. I can actually upload this to VirusTotal. I can upload this to, if you're using Windows Defender Antivirus, I can upload this to our environment where we would run machine learning and detonation across the file and then give you information about the file back, right? So here I'm sitting in the timeline. I can see that I got 0 hits on VirusTotal. I saw no AV detections from our antivirus. Seen prevalence in the world. I can see results available. Again, so here we see a process injection occurring. I can see prevalence, I can see timelines, I can see the machines. And what would be happening is if I am dealing with this guy, again, further details, click on this, let's get into its timeline. As I scroll down here, I can see again the payloads and information. The graph isn't going to register for me, but I can see this request for proposal trade wins. So basically I can move, so that's the bad payload that came in, right? I can request deep analysis. So deep analysis again would be, if you choose, this file would be uploaded to our antivirus environment in Microsoft Defender AV land. And up there, we would do machine learning analysis against the file, and then eventually, if necessary, it would get to one of our human analysts, and they would produce a report on you that you could then pull down. And down here in this timeline, I would see actions and stuff. Now, the problem is I'm looking here, and I need to move back, so I'd have to give me a minute to jump around. I would have staged that had I thought about it, but we'll pivot around this way. What I can do within this environment also is move between the consoles. So if I'm looking at a particular timeline view, I can then would see a link in the corner that would point me back to Office 365. I would click on that link, and that would open up the Office 365 ATP console where I could see information about the file, who else received it, whether they've opened it or not. In the same way, I would pivot into Azure ATP on the identity side. That's just right now turned off in this demo environment.
So something to talk about specific integration. There's a session that because we got that request already, there's a session we're devoting next week to the integration with Office ATP. My role is specifically also working on Microsoft Threat Protection as a whole service. So I will have a session about the current integrations available between the different ATP products. So between Office ATP, Windows ATP, Azure ATP, which is basically your AD anomaly detector, and MCAS, which is your CASB solution, looking at everything going to cloud apps. So there are integration points between all these, but I'll also share with you where we're taking the platform in terms of integrations. The current integrations you have with Office that we can set up in your tenant, if it's not set up already, will be, yes, these links going back and forth in terms of investigation, but there's also an automation investigation that kicks in if Office identifies something bad that went down into the mailbox. It will ask Windows Defender ATP to auto-investigate that case for them and make sure the machine was not compromised. So there is a full integration already going on that end. Also, anything identified from the Office sandbox in your tenant will automatically be blocked on the endpoint if you're running Windows Defender as the AV, and everything detected by the Windows Defender as the AV will be automatically blocked in your Office because they're running the same sandbox in the backend. So there is a tight integration between anything that's discovered on the endpoint being blocked automatically on email and vice versa. So you don't need to go and feed these two systems or make sure that they're synchronized. They do that in the backend. Now, this is something that we can check that your tenant is rigged up already to do that with what you have, because you should have that connectivity existing for you today, unless they live on different environments, and then I don't know. I need to check that.
Thanks, Zvi. Any other questions, or did we address at least that enough till next week?
Yes, yes, definitely.
Thank you, guys. And again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the questions. Please, I much prefer it sounds like there's humans at the other end of the microphone than just me talking out in space. I think we budgeted a few more minutes, but I'm happy to give people time back if there aren't any other things you want to discuss, or I'm happy to stick around and just drive around in the tool some more. What makes the most sense for the happy participants on the Air Force side?
John, there's a lot of quiet out there, but no, this has been great. I wanted to thank you for your time for sure. I'll make sure that I'll send the invite back out to everyone on this call to make sure everyone has awareness of the session next week as well. But I think this really hit the mark as far as what we were looking for in terms of a demo. We had the meeting scheduled for another about 20 minutes or so, just for any additional Q&A. So I'll turn it back over to the audience, but if there's no more questions, I think we're probably good to call it a little early here.
Hey, Kevin, this is Tom Dean. How many folks can you take?
So I believe the room that we have right now can accommodate up to 59 people.
That is correct. Yeah, 59. So Tom, I could talk to you. Yeah, you're more than welcome to contact anyone and invite them. So
Okay, because I'm putting together a list right now.
Awesome. I'll be on site in an hour, and I'll come talk to you.
Okay.
All right.
See you then, brother. Out here.
Hey, sir. This is Anthony Winmar from the 83rd. Hello?
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
we can hear you.
Can you review, I guess, the vulnerability management section again? Can you just show me a few tabs pertaining? So my curiosity is pertaining to like ACAS reports and how that differentiates between that product and this one. Just kind of curious about the dashboard overall.
All right. Well, it's loading up here. You guide me where you want me to click.
So we have a few vulnerability remediation guys here. We're just taking a look at it. Just 1 second, sir.
Okay, I won't scroll around. I'll hold the screen still. So just for context, sorry, because I can't not talk while I'm on the phone and they're paying me to do this. So what you've got in the far right corner is your top recommendations. So you're seeing 5 out of 133. You're seeing a percentage score of that. You're seeing the number of machines that are susceptible or exposed via that, and then you get some context with the little buttons over here. So you can see that in this case, the Threat Insights is providing that a public exploit is available, and then there's information tied back to the CVE for you. So again, if you're doing risk scoring or you're again prioritizing to take action, what we're trying to do is do a first pass on that for you. Not just do a first pass and give you, hey, here's a list, here's context of why these are the ones in the list and why these are the higher up in the list, so that, again, as you're doing triage, we give you more context to make that choice. Because maybe these update Flash player machines are all set inside some enclave that has no connectivity to the internet. And so they may not be as critical because we don't know that, but at least you can say, okay, now I see that, but now I need to go after these other 26 because they are internet facing, and therefore fixing them is much more important than the other ones.
So I wanted to, I'll give you some context on how we came by developing this. We observed a lot of our key customers using advanced hunting to actually look for CVEs. And I'm giving you the history of how this evolved. And when we reached out to them and asked, why are you doing that? So they said, well, for two reasons. One, when I'm running my static scan, whatever TV I have, Qualys, whatever I'm using, I get back a result after 2 weeks. I'm talking about big organizations, and it's 70% complete because 30% of my endpoints did not report back. And now I have 2-week-old data, which is still incomplete, and I'm missing. I really need real-time information because I have a vulnerability out there that's being exploited. The second problem they had is they got a very static. They got, okay, that piece of binary code is vulnerable on the machine, but is it actually being loaded into memory? And they had no visibility into that. What we actually have here, because we are scanning everything, we're not scanning actually, we're monitoring this flight recorder, everything that's being loaded into memory and run. So I can tell you that flash pair is actually being constantly loaded by your LenOB application that you have, and it's been in memory on these machines, which makes it a much higher severity level, even though maybe it's a CVE that doesn't have the same score. The fact that your organization is actually using it means that the attacker can use it because it's setting up in memory. The third angle is what you see here on the left side, top vulnerability softwares. You see that little spider and the bullseye. These are probably the two most important things you want to look at. The spider says that we are observing right now in the wild across all our tenants actors that are actually exploiting that vulnerability. So we are telling you three things now. We're telling you it exists on the machine, the binary. It actually is being loaded into memory, and we are seeing active actors using that vector in the wild. And the fourth one, that bullseye, which is not turned on here, if you had that turned on, it actually means you have an active alert on machines that have that vulnerability. The alert is actually related to the vulnerability because it may be exploiting that. So there's a connection between the alert and the vulnerability. It's the first time anyone in the market on threat vulnerability software actually tried to mash all that information and give you that in real time. So what you have on the top security recommendation on the right-hand side, and this is just a demo environment, but in your real environment, try to share with you the environment in Microsoft when I meet you next week, will be a prioritization based on the fact that it's loaded into memory, someone is using it right now out there, and you have active alerts. So you may want to go and fix that. Now, if you had, again, I'll keep talking about the integration to the other products in Microsoft because that's where all the story comes together. If you had the Azure Information Protection using as a classifier of your classified information, that feeds into Windows. I can also give you the fifth element of that and say, and there is classified information on that box, which is currently is running a vulnerable software loaded into memory, and there's someone acting out there trying to reach for that. So you know that someone is scanning for that vulnerability. So I think that's why we want to demo for you if you want next week. And if you have people in the room that actually look at TV solutions, that would be very interesting for them.
Yeah, I appreciate that insight. So if I understand correctly, the exposure score there is not necessarily a weight based off the CVE score overall.
Correct. I would say it takes that into account in the overall algorithm. I can try to pick up the what we use exactly for calculating, but it's probably not the most important part. The most important part is there an active campaign out there that actually exploiting it, and do you actually have something that's loading it into memory? Because the fact that it's just on the disk, it's going to be very difficult for the attacker to now get it to run and load it. But if you have an application that just loaded it, that's it. You're bullseye. You're home.
So back to that OODA loop, right? Again, trying to give you the right amount of information to orient and then decide and act.
One of the great ironies in my mind is that the OODA loop was developed for figuring out strategy and tactics in a decision loop for facing off against the Soviets. Here we are today with some of our greatest enemies in the cyber domain of war, being Russians, people from the same Volga River Valley and the Dnieper River Valley. And it's just a fascinating irony to me that coming back to a decision cycle, a disciplined decision cycle, is as hard now as it was then when we're facing gobs of tanks on the Iron Curtain.
The other loop that we're working, so we already released it, but we're going to have tighter and tighter integration, is that if you use, and I know you're probably not, but if you use Intune or SCCM in co-manage mode, then this will tie in directly. You can create a task directly from here, which will have a package with all the right update and software and everything to send it into your management console in order for someone to take action. The nice thing about it is me as a security operation center, I can now monitor in real time the progress of the patching or fix of that because I have a constant feed of data. I don't need to go back in them and say, how can you report back? Have you completed the task? Then run another scan. I can see in real time. I can come 48 hours later and say, you're just 22% complete. What's going on? Because I have real data. So this is really taking it to the next level. I mean, our SOC here at Microsoft went nuts over that when we released it.
And then here again, as we talk about orient and take action, here I can see those high alerts. So I can actually see this machine, which has that vulnerability on it, has a high alert on it. So again, I can use this to triage of the 26 machines, which ones need to be dealt with right away, which ones can I get to in 5 minutes or 5 hours. So again, right, we're trying to give you clarity to act.
And another. Yeah,
sorry, go ahead. Oh no, go Zvi, you're the expert.
No, sorry. So another angle is, and again, very important that we observe from some customers. There's no additional load. Okay, it's not a separate client, and when you initial that scan, is going to bombard your network. That's already part of that very lean footprint that Defender ATP has on your network, because we actually test it under the Windows. We compile it with Windows, so we need to stay under very, very low, if you want, noise, either CPU or network traffic. So it's part of that anyway, because your flight recorder for the EDR component is already sending the data. We're just piggybacking in front of the data that's already in the cloud. The other thing is that if the device is on your network or off the network, it doesn't matter. We'll still get the signal. So you get, when you look for that, you get signals for all your devices wherever they are, unless they went dark and you get the latest status. But once they pop up on the network anywhere, you will get the latest status on that. So even for machines that have kind of a on-off environment, they go dark for a while, for whatever scenarios you have in your environment, and then they pop up. The moment they pop up, you get the updated thing. And you didn't just initiate a scan, the machine went dark. When the scan is finished, you never get the data. That will always be up to date.
So let's pull the thread on that. So a more tactical example is you've got a senior executive in the Air Force who is traveling. And so they leave the Air Force Base, they head out to the airport, they get on the United flight, yada, 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 wherever, they jump on the Wi-Fi on that airplane. You're getting telemetry back from that endpoint while they're using the airport Wi-Fi or the airplane Wi-Fi. So again, the visibility you're going to gain with this is much broader than a classic on-premises only solution. That's one of the reasons we moved this to the cloud, is to allow that. So as that machine traverses networks, as that machine traverses places, when it's on, whether they're at home, whether they're teleworking, whether they're on base, you can get telemetry and take action.
Yeah, and we have that use case live in our demo environment today. We've only got about a dozen or so machines onboarded currently, but we do have folks that are traveling TDY with at least one or two laptops where we're seeing that behavior, and yeah, even when those folks are away, we're capturing all that data within the tenant. Probably worth mentioning again with the pilot we have going on right now. We're really looking to expand that, so we wanted to make sure there was some awareness and familiarity with the tooling, which John and Zvi, thank you for helping with today. And then we have the larger event next week in San Antonio. But coming out of that, all these questions around integration and getting some hands-on with the tool, we really want to make sure that we're taking advantage of that pilot and getting some more machines on board and letting you actually play with these things and test these capabilities out in production on the AFNet.
And even better, we've almost gone right to the full time of the meeting.
I appreciate that information, sir. Are you able to dive into the Flash player again really quickly on the right side? Can you dive into the update Flash player?
That one?
Yeah.
All right, here, I'll go the other way. I'm sorry. You wanted me to go this way?
Yeah. And
okay.
Then are you able to export, I'm assuming you are, the content from here, and then can you dive?
Close that.
So this is just a count overall, it's not specific workstation. So the 26 and the 26 is workstation.
Oh, yeah, I can get to the 26 workstations. So that's why I jumped the other way before, so I was looking at it here, but I can get, so I click on that, update Flash player, right? Installed machines shows me all 26 machines.
Now, are you able to, oh yeah, customize columns, okay, perfect.
So that's here, and then I can see the versions, so again, we're not just saying Flash, we're saying which version of Flash on which machine, so.
Just so everybody know, one of the requests that came in and all these tables that come up, and yes, you can customize them. There was also a request from a lot of customers. Just click here and export it into a, CSV file, Excel file, whatever. So probably have that option as well, because some people want to manipulate the data outside of the tool.
Well, the other thing too, right, is because we have the Power BI reporting,
yeah.
This could be a very easy thing to produce. I shouldn't say very easy. It would be something that could be produced in Power BI, and you could pivot and go all around the data. Has anybody there used Power BI? Okay. If you haven't, think of it. If you've ever done a really interesting pivot table in Excel and then turned it into a graph, Power BI is that concept on about 10 layers more of steroids in what it can do and how it can visualize data. So it provides that ability to have a very interesting, full of a variety of visualization choices front end into raw data.
Yeah, and it's live data. So, I mean, you can build a Power BI dashboard on top of this data to have whatever report you have. You don't have to go and refresh it all the time. It just feeds, we'll build a Power BI connector to this data, and then think about it as a cube of the data, and whatever dashboards you build on top of that, these are tools with direct hot links back into the portal to go and take actions. So it's not just nice reports. We have some customers build really tooling on top of that in order for them to show dashboards and take actions.
Right, and here's where you would start to initiate the setup of that. So that's under Settings and Power BI Reports.
Perfect, thank you so much.
Sure. So again, here's the top security recommendations, and again, I can flip in here and see the machines. Again, the impact. Again, I can filter on all of this. There's the inventory again. So we talked about it found 231 applications. So I can again mess with this, resize the console.
And John, I know you talked a little bit about RBAC, but I think it's worth mentioning that we do have an RBAC model built into this. So you could, within the Air Force, you could have the NOSCOS have their own view, the 33rd have their own view, at the base level have their own view, just based on the how the RBAC model is implemented.
Not just their own view, you could scope action. So depending on how incident response and reporting is structured. So let's say a SOC is, let's say, again, I'm making this up, folks, so apologize, but I spent some time working with PACAF years ago. So let's say PACAF had its own SOC. You could tag the assets such that the PACAF SOC could see the assets just that are PACAF, and then you could actually say maybe remediation, part of it is done by people on the base. You could actually set it up so people on the base certain people on the base could only take action against machines on that base, while PACAF could see and monitor and take action on all machines in PACAF if you want. It's a pretty flexible model.
And John, this is Rick. One of the things that we did was we created a group policy object, so the Air Force or anyone else can tag their machines, automated via group policy. Yeah, you're taking the document we put together for DISA down, or do you already have that for the few machines in the test tenant, the one on setting up RBAC? I don't know if they have it. Okay.
I do not. No.
You should bring it.
We have a session also driven by John Nieves, which is going to be with us next week. So specifically on RBAC. It's a very elaborate model which allows you to think about two pivots, right? What machines, who can access what machines, but also what permissions do you give who accesses machines? Is it read only, read and write, remediate? So it's also what can you do with these machines? So you can really build a lot of groups, and you can have subgroups, and you can have a lot of hierarchy. We designed that for a global organization that has 700 subsidiaries, and each one of them is a different view. So it was designed very with over 1 million endpoints in that organization. So.
Yeah, hi everyone. I just put a link in the chat window that talks about our overview on RBAC. So if you got some time, take a reading into that. It sets the stage on how we can talk further into that.
Yeah, here's the article we published on it, just to make life easy. And John has the document, so he'll bring it with him. We put a document together for the DISA pilot that just sort of is a way of stepping you through it. It doesn't tell you how to structure the tags, but it guides you through the process of actually turning it on, where to go turn what knob and set what thing. But here is the example of the one that Zvi was talking about, we referred to earlier. So you'll see here you've got different SOCs, operational requirements, multiple locations, regional locations. So they had a complex SOC model they wanted to implement. And again, RBAC and tagging allows us to do exactly that. It gives you that flexibility so that you don't have to force our tool, your operations to change to our tool, although you can make changes to your operations because of what the tool supports. And so you'll see here a multi-tier environment, geographically distributed, with also a executive tier. So again, very flexible capability in who can see what and who can do what to what. So since I knew where that article was, I thought I'd bring it up real quick. And we're over time now. Look at that. We promised you 20 minutes early, and we actually took you a minute over. Or I'm on the call by myself. That's fine.
Now you still got us here, John. I think we exhausted the questions at this point, but it's been a great conversation, and I appreciate you and Zvi and John being here to support.
I'm just sorry I can't be down there next week. I apologize, but you've got a much better crowd coming than me anyway. So, well, it's my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, to give you some primers on this so that next week you can ask the really great questions. If there's some stuff that comes up in the interim, please route it to our folks so that we can make sure that gets to Zvi and Rick and everybody else before they hit the ground. Otherwise, they'll just have to flex while they're there.
Thanks, Jay. And yeah, for on the Microsoft side, so it's me, Kevin Dillon, Elgin, Favis, and Jay Inman are working it. So reach out to any one of us, and we'll get the answers fed back to you. All right. Well, thanks all. Thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate everyone's time today.
Hey, this is 83rd. We appreciate it. Thanks for the invite. We're out.
Thanks.